Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. I'd like to take a moment and thank the elite members of the channel. Thank you so much for your love, dedication, and support of Back to Ashes and myself. I can't find the words to thank you enough. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Middle of Nowhere Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. Right after the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. I set out from Cheyenne at the crack of dawn, the sky still bruised with night, convinced I could devour the endless miles to Seattle in one brutal haul. The night before, I'd obsessively triple-checked my battered old Subaru. Oil levels, tire pressure, that pathetic emergency kit tucked in the trunk like a false promise of safety. But even as I slammed the hood shut, an insidious little voice whispered in the back of my skull, insisting I'd forgotten something vital. I despise that voice. It slithers in uninvited whenever I'm on the brink of something vast and unforgiving, like a harbinger of doom I can't quite shake. The first hours bled into monotony, desolate highways stretching like veins across the barren Wyoming plains, punctuated only by the occasional growl of a semi-truck lumbering past. My playlist scratching through the speakers, a feeble ward against the encroaching boredom. But every so often, I'd flick my eyes to the fuel gauge, promising myself I'd stop at the next decent exit. Of course, decent became a moving target. One rest area loomed like a skeletal husk, pumped long since ripped out, graffitis scarring the walls with cryptic warnings I didn't linger to decipher. Another boasted a motel that squatted low and menacing, its windows like empty eye sockets staring back, evoking scenes from nightmares where travelers check in but never leave. I muttered excuses to myself. Keep going. Something's better ahead. But deep down, a chill warmed its way into my bones, as if the road itself was conspiring to lure me deeper into isolation. As Wyoming blurred into Idaho's vast, swallowing emptiness, the landscape grew lonelier, the plains undulated like the breath of some colossal slumbering beast. Clouds dragged themselves across the sky like funeral shrouds, casting shadows that seemed to pulse without hidden intent. An unnatural hush descended, broken only by the intermediate loss of my phone signal. A digital lifeline severed, leaving me adrift in a sea of silence. That's when the unease truly took root, coiling in my gut like a parasite. Cut off, alone, vulnerable. Then a billboard materialized from the haze, its letters half devoured by time and wind. But I pieced together the fragments. Clarkston, gas and home-style mills. The sign was a relic, paint flaking like dead skin, corners curled as if recoiling from its own message. Something about it felt wrong, like a trap baited with false hope. But my gas tank hovered, perilously near empty. I veered onto a narrow state road that snaked away from the highway, noticing immediately the absence of other vehicles. Not a single tire track marred the cracked pavement. The fields flanking the path were brittle and scorched, as if fire had ravaged them decades ago, and the earth refused to heal, harboring grudges in its charred soil. Isolation pressed down heavier with every mile, a weight that made my breath come shallow. But I pressed on, the needle dipping into the red like a countdown to catastrophe. Finally, Clarkston emerged from the desolation, but it was no sanctuary. It was the corpse of a town, decaying under the indifferent sky. Warped wooden signs tilted drunkenly. A diner with boarded windows like bandaged wounds. And at the raged edge of what passed for Main Street, a rundown gas station squatted like a predator in wait. Its neon sign flickered weakly in the window, a sickly pulse that mimicked a dying heartbeat. At first, relief flickered through me. At least it was something tangible. But as I parked by a solitary pump, the silence slammed into me. No rumble of distant engines, no murmur of voices, just the wind hissing across the fractured asphalt like whispered secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I yanked the nozzle free, squeezed the handle, and nothing. No reassuring gush of fuel, just hollow clicks echoing into the void. I jiggled levers, peered at the pump's rusted flanks for some archaic switch, but it remained stubbornly inert, as if the machine itself had conspired against me. There had to be someone inside, some guardian of this forsaken relic. I approached the door, the metal bell clinking overhead like a toll for the damned. The air within was stale and thick, laced with the musty rot of abandonment, as if the building had been sealed shut for years, trapping whatever lingered inside. Shelves sagged under dusty candy bars, brands I knew, but wrappers twisted and outdated. Colors bled to ghostly hues, evoking products from a parallel era where time had curdled. A stack of newspapers near the counter caught my eye, the headline blaring about a local fair, dated 2002. A hollow laugh bubbled up in my throat, but it died quickly, replaced by a creeping dread that clawed at my nerves. I called out a tentative, "Hello?" My voice swallowed by the emptiness, but no response came. A door in the back hung half open, an invitation to deeper shadows. Curiosity, that treacherous impulse, pulled me forward. I nudged it wider. A single bulb buzzed to life overhead, flickering erratically, strobing the room in fits of light and dark. A coffee mug perched on a desk, its contents dried to a viscous sludge, black and ominous, like congealed blood. A coat draped over a chair, as if its owner had stepped away mid-sentence, promising to return. But the dust blanketing it whispered of eternal absence. Who abandons their life like this? 7 years? Longer? The math didn't add up, and neither did the faint, acrid smell wafting from a corner. Metallic tang mingled with the putrid sweetness of spoiled meat, turning my stomach. I inched closer, spotting an old mop bucket brimming with slimy water, iridescent, scum floating like eyes on its surface. I recoiled, the building suddenly feeling alive with oppression, walls closing in as if to trap me in its forgotten misery. Outside, the row of buildings along the street loomed like silent sentinels, windows caked in grime, doors hanging askew on rusted hinges. A battered sign creaked overhead. Restaurant, swaying in the breeze like a noose in the wind. The glass was so filthy, peering inside revealed only vague shapes, amorphous shadows that could have been furniture, or something else. Logic screamed to flee, to coax whatever fumes remained from my tank and escape. But a twisted hope mingled with dread. Maybe one soul lingered here, a keeper of secrets who could revive the pump. Ignoring the pit deepening in my stomach, I crossed the cracked pavement, each step echoing unnaturally loud, as if the ground itself resented my intrusion. The pit grew into an abyss as I neared those lifeless facades, paint peeling like flayed skin, signs dangling like broken necks. No lights burned save the feeble flicker from the station, and yet I scanned the windows obsessively, half expecting a face to materialize, pale, unblinking, watching. At the first storefront, I knocked on the doorframe. The thud was dull, absorbed by the decay. No echo to suggest life beyond. Peering through the murk, I discerned tables shrouded in dust so thick it resembled funeral veils. A flyer on the wall advertising a summer festival, its faded Ferris wheel twisting in the dimness like a wheel of torment. How long had it hung there? A relic of joy long extinguished? I pressed on to the cluster of houses. Small, single-storied tombs huddled together. Yards strangled by weeds that writhed like fingers from the grave. One door stood ajar, hinges screeching a warning as the wind teased it. Curiosity, now laced with a morbid compulsion, drew me inside. The air assaulted my lungs, stale like ancient homes, soured by an undercurrent of decay. The living room was frozen in a macabre tableau, an ordinary afternoon petrified. A couch with a blanket draped as if mid-fold. A half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, pieces scattered like clues to an unsolved horror. A TV remote balanced precariously on the armrest. Grit coated everything, as if the outside world had invaded and claimed dominion, turning the space into a dusty mausoleum. Family photos lined the walls, smiling faces from vacations that now seemed mocking, eyes following me with accusatory stares. One image snagged my gaze. A small child clutching a balloon, grin wide and innocent, but the balloon string tailed off frame, as if leading to unseen horrors. Did that child escape, or were they swallowed by whatever curse befell this place? The eerie silence offered no solace. Deeper in, a narrow hallway beckoned, shadows pulling at its end where a door stood slightly ajar. My heart hammered as I nudged it open with my foot, revealing a bedroom in disarray. Curtains half drawn, admitting slivers of light that illuminated chaos. Clothes spilling from a dresser like entrails. Pictures strewn across the floor. I crouched to retrieve one. A teenager embracing a dog. The animal's fur blurred in motion, but something in its eyes looked desperate, as if fleeing an invisible threat. The vitality in these snapshots clashed violently with the dead town, making the absence feel deliberate, malevolent. Down the hall, a door painted with chipped stars and planets. A child's room, perhaps. I pushed it open, and the sight chilled me to the core. A small bed, stuffed animals hurled about in frozen frenzy, a teddy bear glaring with one glassy eye missing, its fur stiff and matted with dark stains that could have been dirt or worse. A coloring book lay face down, crowns scattered like discarded bones. It felt profane, this intrusion into a vanished family's intimacy, as if I'd stumbled upon the aftermath of some unspeakable rite. Suddenly, a faint creak pierced the silence, a floorboard groaning under phantom weight. My blood turned to ice. I froze, breath held, scanning the dim corners where shadows seemed to shift, coiling like tendrils. Was someone, or something, there, lurking just beyond sight? Seconds stretched into eternities, the air thickening with unspoken menace. When no further sound came, I dismissed it as wind or my own paranoia. but the tension coiled tighter, a noose around my nerves. I backed out, nearly tripping over an overturned chair that hadn't been there before. Or had it? My mind raced, nerves fraying like exposed wires. Outside, the air tasted of dust and despair, twilight descending like a shroud, painting the world in bruised purples and grays. Street lamps, if they ever existed, were shattered relics, and the encroaching dark whispered promises of horrors unseen. I jogged to my Subaru, half convinced it would vanish or refuse to start. But it waited, silent and accusatory. I slammed inside, locked the doors against the encroaching night. The fuel gauge mocked me, needle buried in red. The engine coughed twice, a death rattle, before sputtering to life. Static hissed from the radio as I twisted the dial desperately, seeking any voice to affirm I wasn't utterly alone. Just crackles and whispers that sounded almost like faint, mocking laughter. I rolled through the main strip, eyes darting to mirrors, expecting a silhouette to emerge from the gloom. Pursuing, relentless. Nothing stirred, but the diner's dark neon and the station's flickering ghost haunted my periphery. Those outdated wrappers and sludge-filled mugs, symbols of lives abruptly severed. A battered sign announced, "Leaving Clarkston," defaced with spray-painted scrawls, faded glyphs that twisted into warnings my mind couldn't decipher in the dim. The road ahead plunged into pitch black, headlights carving meager paths through tumbleweeds that skittered like fleeing vermin. Relief warred with lingering terror as a modern sign loomed, "Mountain Home." My heart lurched at the prospect of normalcy. Lights, pumps, people. I limped in on vapors. The pumps hum a symphony of salvation. Inside the store, I babbled about the ghost town to the clerk, who eyed me like a madman escaped from the abyss. "Clarkston? Back that way?" She shrugged, her indifference a fresh wound. Never heard of it." Frustrated, I phoned the sheriff's office. After transfers that felt like descending circles of hell, a deputy drawled, "Yep, old settlement. Folks abandoned it. Farmland dried up." His tone was flat, uninterested, but something in his pauses hinted at unspoken truth. Files buried deep where light never reaches. Even as I pushed on to Boise, checked into a motel and collapsed onto a bed that offered no true rest, Clarkston clung to me like a shadow. Those dusted, choked rooms, the teddy bear's vacant stare, the unblinking emptiness. It wasn't mere abandonment. It reeked of flight, of ordinary lives ruptured by something insidious, perhaps a force that devoured them mid-breath, leaving echoes to ensnare the unwary. By Seattle, I tried burying it, laughing it off to friends as a recession's relic. But flashes ambushed me, scattered crayons like cries for help, that creak in the silence suggesting I wasn't alone. Part of me craves the truth, some battered file in a forgotten office revealing the horror. The rest knows better. Clarkston waits, its secrets festering, ready to claim anyone foolish enough to return. The desert outside Phoenix stretched before me like a graveyard of forgotten ambitions, its jagged hills and thorn-choked gulches mocking my every step. I was 25 miles from anything resembling civilization, tasked with surveying a swath of rugged land for a series of sprawling developments. The year was sometime in the late 90s, when every patch of Arizona dirt was being carved up for future cities, no matter how hostile the terrain. I arrived at 5 a.m. The sky was still bruised with night, hoping to outrun the heat that would soon climb past 100 degrees. Surveying in the desert is a brutal affair. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It's bushwhacking through razor underbrush, hill busting across miles of uncharted land, and praying you don't cross paths with a rattlesnake or a Gila monster. Arizona's venomous lizard with a bite that could leave you disoriented, swollen, and dead under the sun's merciless hammer. I set up base camp as always, anchoring my work to the satellites above. A tripod with a box and antenna, a crate tethered by wires. It was my lifeline to precise coordinates. With my GPS rod in my hand, I sent data back to camp, mapping the invisible lines that would one day birth suburbs and strip malls. My pack was heavy with more gear than I needed. A magnetized metal detector, hatchet, hammer, bush knife, rope, hand shovel, and .32 caliber pistol tucked into my boot. The gun was for snakes or coyotes, a cheap little thing I figured I'd never use. It dangled from my belt or slung across my back, clanking with every step, a reminder of the desert's unpredictability. Property corners were often buried under 18 inches of iron-hard soil, demanding I hack and chisel my way through with a hatchet and hammer, the shovel scooping out the loosened earth. It was grueling, solitary work, and I liked it that way. Until that day. The sun was a relentless fist by 10 a.m., pounding my neck until the skin blistered and peeled. I crested a hill, sweat stinging my eyes, and spotted a low concrete bridge in the distance, squatting alone in the vast emptiness. It was nothing special, maybe 12 feet tall, likely an old ranch road crossing. I gave it no thought as I descended into the next lot, my boots sliding on loose shale. The terrain grew vicious, a tangled mess of cactus spines and thorn branches that sliced my arms to ribbons. At the bottom waited a gulch, a sandy scar in the earth I'd have to cross with all my gear, then claw my way up the other side. The thought of a Gila monster lurking in the underbrush gnawed at me. One bite, and the venom would burn through my veins, swelling my limbs, spiking my blood pressure, leaving me staggering, lost, and cooked alive by the sun. I pushed the fear down, my body forged into metal by years of this work, and dropped into the gulch. The climb out was hell, the air so thick with heat I could barely breathe. Spider-webbed creek beds forced me up and down, each step a battle against the land itself. By the time I stumbled into a dust-choked clearing, I was ready to collapse. The bridge, now just under a quarter-mile away, was the only shade for miles. A cruel oasis in this god-forsaken waste. My neck burned raw. Skin cancer, a constant specter for years under the sun. I'd had it cut out before, and I'd have it cut out again. The desert didn't care about your tan or your toughness. It burned everyone the same. As I approached the bridge, something emerged from the haze, a hulking shape beneath its shadow. Closer now, I saw it was a dumpster, its rusted bulk out of place in the barren expanse. Odd, but not unthinkable. Ranchers dump things out here. It wasn't a city, but it wasn't the moon either. At 25 yards, the details grew stranger. The dumpster was scrawled with jagged, uneven symbols, letters or runes, but I couldn't tell. Etched in what looked like chalk or ash, tracks snaked from its base, deep ruts stretching into the desert as far as I could see. This thing hadn't been dropped off. Someone had pushed it here, across miles of unforgiven terrain, for days, maybe weeks. The realization settled like ice in my gut. Who would do that? And why here, under the only shade in this endless hell? I stepped beneath the bridge, the sudden absence of the sun's weight like a stay of execution. I shrugged off the gear, letting it clatter to the ground, and took a swig from my canteen. The air was still, heavy with dust and something else, an acrid metallic tang I couldn't place. I sat, trying to breathe, to still a moment before the final leg of the journey. Then it came. A sharp scrape, like metal on metal, followed by the plastic lid of the dumpster slamming open against its steel frame. My heart lurched. I turned just as the figure rose from the darkness inside. A bald man, his scalp a patchwork of nicks and cuts, as if he'd shaved with a broken blade. He stood upright in the dumpster's mouth, hands hidden inside, still scraping at something unseen. Before I could move, he seized the lip of the container and vaulted out, body arcing through the air with unnatural grace, like some predator springing from its lair. I stumbled back, tripping over my gear and crashing into the dirt. My mind blanked. No phone, no truck, just me and this thing, miles from help. He crouched low, his eyes bulging, veins pulsing in his neck, dried blood crusted on his chin. In his hand, he brandished a 16-inch screwdriver. Its tip snapped off, leaving a twisted, hooked shard that gleamed like a ritual blade. His lips moved, muttering in a guttural tongue that wasn't English, wasn't anything I'd ever heard. It was a sound that crawled up my spine like the desert itself was whispering through him. I scrambled backward, half crab-walking, thorns biting into my palms. He advanced, the screwdriver slashing the air, his face a mask of manic glee. If he pinned me, I was done. His weight and that jagged weapon would end me. Instinct took over. I yanked the pistol from my boot, its cold weight steadying my trembling hands. I aimed it at his face, the barrel's black eyes staring him down. He froze, his grin faltering, and took a step back. I pushed to my feet, backing against the bridge's concrete wall, my eyes darting for any sign of others. I wasn't getting caught off guard again. "What are you doing out here?" he rasped, his voice like gravel scraped over bone. I told him I was a surveyor, just working, not here to bother him. I even apologized, my voice steady despite the fear coiling in my chest. I wasn't heartless. I'd seen plenty of down-and-out folks in Phoenix's sprawling homeless camps. But this man was different. His movements were jerky, like a puppet, with half its strings cut, and those symbols on the dumpster. They reminded me of something unholy, like sigils from a nightmare I couldn't name. I asked how long he'd been out here. He shrugged, then laughed. A sharp barking sound that echoed under the bridge. He turned to my gear, rifling through it with deliberate slowness, his fingers lingering over each item like he was reading their secrets. "Don't touch that," I warned, my grip tightening on the pistol. He growled, low and animal, but didn't stop. He didn't take anything, just studied each piece. The hatchet, the shovel, the rope, like they were relics from some lost altar. Then, without a word, he tucked the screwdriver into his waistband, dropped to all fours, and crawled back into the dumpster. The lid slammed shut, but not fully. Through a 2-inch gap, his eyes glinted in the shadows, watching me, unblinking, as I gathered my things. I slid along the wall back into the sun's punishing glare. My heart hammering. Against every instinct, I finished the survey, circling the bridge at a distance of a mile or two. I kept my eyes on it, half expecting him to emerge again, or worse, for others to appear. Twice, I saw him climb out, flailing in the shadows, hurling rocks against the dumpster's still shell, with a fury that seemed to shake the air itself. Each clang carried a weight, like a summons to something I couldn't see. By afternoon, I hit my last coordinate and started the long trek back to my truck. That's when I saw it. His dumpster, no longer under the bridge, moving across the desert. He was pushing it, alone, through rocks and sand, using wooden boards to navigate the uneven ground. It was madness, a Sisyphean task under the relenting sun. I watched, transfixed, as he shoved that rusted monolith toward some unknown destination, his figure shrinking into the haze. It was as if the desert had claimed him, or he had claimed it, a keeper of its secrets, bound to a purpose I'd never understand. I returned sporadically over the next year for data, but he was gone, vanished like smoke. Yet sometimes in the desert silence, I swear I hear scraping, see eyes in shadows, and I wonder, was he ever just a man, or something that's wore one's skin, waiting for the next fool to seek shade in the devil's playground? I remember that day, like a shadow that never quite lifts from my mind. May 20th, 1999. The air was thick with the kind of chill that seeps into your bones, even in the Australian autumn. I was one of the 2 South Australian police officers assigned to follow up on that tip. A whisper from some faceless informant that slithered into our ears like a serpent's hiss. Drive 80 miles north from Adelaide, they said, to a godforsaken speck on the map called Snowtown. Population, barely 300 souls, if you could call them that. A place where the wind howls through empty streets like forgotten screams, and the buildings sag under the weight of secrets long buried. We drove for hours along the A1 highway, the road stretching out like a vein pulsing towards something rotten at the heart. My partner, let's call him Tom, though names don't matter much in a story like this, kept his eyes on the horizon, but I could feel the unease coiling in the cruiser. The informant had been specific. Head to the old abandoned bank on First Street, into the vault. Thoroughly. No explanations, just that cold directive. As we pulled into Snowtown, the town greeted us with silence. No kids playing, no dogs barking. Just the creak of rusted signs swinging in the breeze, like pendulums counting down to doom. We parked outside the bank, its facade crumbling like the face of a corpse left too long in the sun. The door was secured, but not well. A few jimmies with the tools, and we were in. Flashlights pierced the gloom as we crept down these dark, dusty hallways. The air was stale, heavy with dust and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. Our boots echoed off the walls, each step a heartbeat too loud. as if the building itself was alive and listening. We reached the vault, that massive steel door ajar, like it had been waiting for us, inviting us in. I pulled it open, the hinges groaning like a dying man's last breath. Inside, half a dozen large plastic barrels stood sentinel in the dim light. They were ordinary things, blue, industrial, the kind you would store chemicals in. But the way they hulked there, sealed tight, sent a shiver up my spine. Tom and I exchanged a glance, suspicions gnawing at us like rats in the dark. I edged forward, my hand trembling just a bit as I peeled back a corner of one lid. The stench hit me like a physical blow. Rotting flesh, acrid and sweet, the kind that clings to your clothes, your skin, your soul. It was overpowering, a wave of decay that made my stomach churn and my eyes water. We backed away, gagging, but we knew. God, we knew. By the time the forensics team arrived, we'd pulled 8 human corpses from those 6 barrels, mangled, decomposed, stuffed in like garbage. The media descended like vultures, turning sleepy Snowtown into a circus of horror. Panic spread through Adelaide and beyond, whispers of a serial killer lurking in the shadows, preying on the vulnerable. The public demanded answers, swift justice. But as we dug deeper, we uncovered a nightmare that had been festering for years. An investigation into disappearances stretching back 5 years, centered on a man whose name still makes my blood run cold. John Justin Bunting. I pieced it together over sleepless nights, poring over files in dimly lit rooms where the walls seemed to close in. Bunting was born September 4th, 1966, in Inala, Queensland. On the surface, a normal kid. Stable home. No records of abuse or neglect. School reports, up to age 8, painted him as average, unremarkable. But then, something shattered him. At a neighbor's house, 8-year-old Johnny found himself alone with his friend's older brother. Cornered, beaten, assaulted in ways no child should endure. It twisted him, planted a seed of hatred for homosexuals and pedophiles that grew into a monstrous vine, choking everything in its path. As a teenager, he hid behind a camera, snapping photos with a talented eye for composition. But this fascination with human anatomy wasn't artistic. It was pathological, a dark obsession that whispered of dissections and worse. He reveled in violence, bragged about it. At 22, he worked in a Queensland abattoir, slaughtering animals in factory style. He didn't just do the job, he enjoyed it. The blood, the screams, the power of ending life. It was practice, I realize now, for what was to come. In 1991, at 25, he slithered into the Adelaide suburb of Salisbury. There, he befriended Robert Joe Wagner, 20 years old, and Mark Ray Hayden, 33. Bunting was charismatic, a snake charmer with a dominant personality that wrapped around weaker minds like chains. He drew in the vulnerable, the disaffected, people craving direction, a sense of belonging. Over years, he built a cult of hatred, targeting pedophiles, homosexuals, anyone he deemed morally corrupt. What started as shared outrage festered in ideology, a twisted moral crusade. He indoctrinated them slowly, persistently, becoming their leader, their god. Wagner, Hayden, James Velasquez. They became his acolytes, complicit in sadistic violence masked as justice, but driven by greed, control, and prejudice. Clinton Douglas Trezizi, 20, invited to Bunting's apartment for a social call. Bunting declared him a child abuser, judge, jury, executioner. In his living room, with his followers watching like eager shadows, he beat Trezizi to death with a shovel, buried in a shallow grave. Years later, in 1997, Bunting watched Australia's Most Wanted episodes about Trezizi, with Velasquez and his mother, boasting, "That's my handiwork." The words chilled me when I heard them. An interrogation. Casual, proud, like admiring a painting. Next, Ray Davies, 26, targeted in 1995 for dating Bunting's ex, Suzanne Allen, who was intellectually disabled. Flimsy accusations of advances on her grandsons. On Christmas Day, Bunting, with Allen's help and Velasquez's mother, stabbed Davies in the legs, immobilized him. Wagner strangled him unconscious. They drove to Bukhara, tossed him in a bathtub like discarded meat, tortured for bank details, mutilated his genitals with a sharpened metal pole. Once drained dry, beaten to death. Allen's daughter saw them clearing Davis's caravan on Boxing Day. Bunting confessed to Velasquez, his voice dripping with glee. Then, Suzanne Allen herself, 47. Bunting wanted her money, accused her of perverse collusions. Killed her. Method unknown. Wrapped her in plastic, buried at his property. He fraudulently claimed $17,000 of her pension. Charges dropped later for lack of evidence. A ghost haunting the case. Michael Gardner, 19. Wagner's wife's cousin. Cross-dressing drew Bunting's homophobic ire. Saw him with Wagner's kids. Misinterpreted a gesture as assault. Echo of his own trauma. Convinced Gardner to Murray Bridge, to a shed. Strangled repeatedly, reviving him each time for more torment. Finally, choked to death. Staged a robbery at his apartment. Told the landlady Gardner stole for a sex change. Body in a barrel, left foot severed to seal the lid. The casual brutality. It made my skin crawl, imagining the screams echoing in that shed. Vanessa Lane, 42, another ex-girlfriend, welcomed into the circle for hunting child abusers, but accused of grooming. Home firebombed. Began dating 18-year-old Thomas Trevelyan, who betrayed her to Bunting, claiming prior molestation. October 17, 1997, picked her up, forced her to call her mother, disown her, cut ties so no one would report her missing, crushed her toes with pliers for bank details, strangled. Less than a month later, Trevelyan, schizophrenic and unhinged, chased a dog with a knife. Bunting saw him as a liability, drove him to Kersbrook, hanged him from a tree, and humbug scrub. Gavin Porter, 29, Velasquez's associate, schizophrenic heroin addict. Bunting called him waste. Attacked in his car on Bunting's property. Body shown to Velasquez as a warning. Barreled. Troy Udy, 21, Velasquez's half-brother, abused Velasquez in youth. Bound at home, bathtub torture. Bunting filmed it, pliers on toes, forced to call him God or Master Father. Financial info extracted, strangled. Frederick Robert Brooks, 18, Hayden's nephew, accused of touching up girls, tricked to a party house, cigarettes in ears and nostrils, sparkler in urethra, bleach injected into testicles, electrocuted with the Variac, toe crushed, gagged to death. Gary O'Dwyer, 29, disabled, targeted for disability payments, tortured, strangled. Elizabeth Hayden, 37, Mark's wife, about to report them, forced entry, murdered, shown to Hayden. He laughed, disposed. David Johnson, 24, Velasquez's half-brother, Bunting's homophobic slurs for his cleanliness, tricked to Snowtown Bank for a cheap computer, overpowered, murdered. Bunting and Wagner fried and ate his flesh. Cannibalism, the ultimate desecration. For years, they evaded us. Victims were marginalized. Disappearances didn't alarm, but suspicions grew. Velasquez, the addict, cracked, confessed in custody. Withdrawal breaking him. His account led us to surveillance, to Snowtown, to those barrels. The trial was a descent into hell. Complex, expensive. Bunting and Wagner, life without parole. Velasquez, life, minimum 26 years for cooperation. Hayden, 25 years for disposal. Snowtown's stained forever, a name whispered in fear. It exposed how prejudice, greed, manipulation breed malevolence. But as I sit here years later, in the quiet of night, I feel it. Their shadows lingering. Bunting's hatred, a virus that could infect anyone. And sometimes, in the dark, I smell that stench again, hear the echoes of screams from those barrels. It never truly ends. I was just 13 when my mother decided I was ripe enough to face the festering rot of our neighborhood alone. We scraped by in a suffocating duplex on the ragged fringe of Riverton, where the walls bled their paint in long weeping strips, exposing the sun-bleached bones beneath. Our porch light sputtered like a dying insect, casting erratic shadows that seemed to whisper secrets to the empty street. The air always carried a faint rot, like something long dead was buried just under the pavement. Most folks around us had barricaded themselves indoors, their windows dark eyes staring out from behind curtains. But my mother? She orbited in her own twisted world, one where my little sister and I were mere afterthoughts. She'd send me out into the night for her errands, borrowing scraps of food, delivering cryptic packages, as if the encroaching darkness was no more threatening than a summer breeze. Her lips would curl into that smug, knowing smile every time, like she was testing me, or worse, offering me up to whatever lurked beyond our door. One frigid November evening, she burst into the dim living room, her eyes gleaming with that unnatural satisfaction. "Take this bag to your uncle's," she commanded, thrusting the bloated sack at me. Our washer had gasped its last breath months ago, so the task made a twisted kind of sense. But the hour? Night had fallen like a shroud, thicker than usual, swallowing the stars whole. The porch light's feeble flicker only deepened the voids between the houses. I was a hefty kid, 280 pounds of awkward bulk, but the thought of venturing into those desolate streets alone sent a cold spike through my chest, making my hands tremble in secret. My temples throbbed with a familiar dread, a pressure that built like storm clouds in my skull. Still, arguing was futile. Her word was law, laced with an undercurrent of malice I couldn't quite name. I hoisted the bag, zipped up my hoodie against the chill, and as I reached the door, some primal instinct made me slip a steak knife into my pocket, its cold edge pressed against my side like a silent promise, though I couldn't say why I needed it. The night air slithered in as I stepped out, heavy and oppressive, wrapping around me like unseen fingers. The street was unnaturally still. No distant hum of engines, no muffled voices from porches, not even the ragged bark of the strays that usually haunted the curbs. My sneakers scraped against the cracked sidewalk, each step echoing too loudly, as if the silence itself was listening, judging. Block by block, I dragged that cursed bag, its weight pulling at my shoulders, like it wanted to anchor me in place. Pauses came unbidden, and in those moments, a faint tapping slithered into my ears. Metallic, deliberate, like a coin flicked against concrete, or nails testing the ground. I dismissed it as my mind's cruel trick, the anxiety gnawing at my edges. But it persisted, growing insistent. To cut time, I ducked into a narrow alley where dim security lights stuttered like failing hearts, birthing jagged shadows that clawed at the walls. The fences loomed like skeletal sentinels, and dumpsters squatted in the gloom, exhaling the stench of decay. I felt eyes on me, boring into my back from hidden crevices. But the alley was empty, devoid of life, or so I told myself. Emerging onto my uncle's block, relief washed over me like tainted water. His house, though weathered, had a steady porch light that pierced the dark like a beacon. He entered the door with a snort, his face etched with weary suspicion. He knew my mother's games all too well. I shoved the bag into his hands and he invited me in to linger. But the phone shrilled, shattering the moment. It was her, voice sharp and laced with irritation, demanding I return immediately. My uncle protested, but she cut him off like a blade through flesh. I shrugged it off, eager to escape the tension. But as I stepped back into the night, the clouds had thickened, devouring the moon and stars, leaving the world in inky blackness. Streetlights stood, sentinel, too far apart, birthing long swaths of void that seemed to pulse with hidden intent. The tapping returned then, closer, more rhythmic, like a predator's heartbeat, syncing with mine. My pulse roared in my ears, a frantic drumbeat urging me to hurry. I quickened my pace, whispering lies to myself. It's just a dripping gutter, a loose wire, but the air grew heavier, charged with something malevolent. Then, ahead, a silhouette materialized. Tall, gaunt, half concealed behind a rusted chain-link fence. It stood motionless, head cocked at an unnatural angle, as if appraising its prey. My mind reeled. Was it a man? A dog reared up? No, too elongated, torso too narrow, skin glistening with a sickly sheen under the faint light, like oil on diseased flesh. My fingers found the knife handle, gripping it like a talisman. The figure shifted, limbs bending in ways that defied bone and sinew, joints popping softly, as if accustomed to prowling on all fours but mocking humanity by standing. Dread coiled in my gut, a serpent awakening. I veered onto a side street, heart slamming against my ribs, but the rustle followed, the fence rattling as it moved, that tapping evolving into scratches, nails dragging over metal with deliberate menace. In a blur, it vaulted the fence, landing with a soft thud mere yards away. Panic ignited. I ran, the bag slamming against my legs like a shackle. Scraping sounds pursued, claws skittering on pavement, rhythmic and gaining. A glance back revealed its bounding limbs sinking into a grotesque ballet, eyes flaring red like embers from hell's forge. I crashed through a forbidden yard, weeds snaring my ankles, junk lurking like traps. My foot caught a buried cinder block. I sprawled, skin tearing on gravel, breath ragged and metallic in my throat. It loomed then, a cold shadow eclipsing the night. The stench assaulted me. Stagnant water mingled with rotting leaves, the perfume of something ancient and foul. On all fours now, it hovered, saliva dripping from jagged teeth that gleamed like shattered glass. Without thought, I wrenched the knife free and slashed upward. The blade bit into yielding flesh. A hiss roar erupted, vibrating through the bones like a curse. It swatted at my wrist, claws raking fire across my skin, but headlights pierced the dark. A passing truck's beam illuminating the horror. Eyes like glowing coals, papery skin taut over corded muscles, scars etching its hide like ritual marks. It recoiled with a guttural snarl that splintered my sanity, then melted into the shadows as the lights faded. I lay there, gasping, the world spinning in nauseous waves. Memory blurred after that, waking in a sterile clinic, stitching pulling at my forearm like accusing threads, bruising blooming like dark flowers on my legs. My uncle hovered, face pale with unspoken questions. I mumbled about a stray dog, the lie tasting like ash. Deep down, I knew it was no animal. It was something older, hungrier, and that single wound I'd inflicted, it would only fuel its grudge. 13 years have slithered by since that night in Riverton. I'm 26 now, hunkered in a modest one-story house in Meadowview with my grandmother. Her health has withered, heart fluttering like a trapped bird, knees swollen and treacherous, leaving her reliant on me for the mundane cruelties of daily life. It's only fair. She was the sole anchor in my fractured childhood. Yet the terror from Riverton festers in the recesses of my mind, a dormant parasite stirring at the shadow's edges. The first months here were deceptively serene. I jolted a creaking branch in the witching hours, but I'd buried the fear, chalking it up to echoes of the past. Meadowview exuded a subdued calm. No peeling facades, no stuttering lights, just orderly homes under watchful skies. But anomalies crept in, insidious as mold. Mornings revealed gashes on the trash bin, deep and deliberate, as if talons had probed for weakness. Then, in the driveway's mud, prints emerged, paw-like, yet grotesquely oversized, front and rear misaligned, suggesting a gait that mocked nature. Neighbors muttered of odd footprints in their yards, blaming raccoons or coyotes, but I knew better. These were harbingers, whispers from the abyss. Sleep fractured under the weight of paranoia. Every rustle amplified, dragging me to windows where I'd peer into that void, expecting red eyes to stare back. I'd convinced myself time had dulled the blade, that I was stronger, wiser, but doubt gnawed relentlessly. One suffocating night at 1 a.m., a clatter shattered the silence from the backyard. Crowbar in hand, its iron cold and reassuring, I ventured out, flashlight beam slicing the dark like a scalpel. The trash can lay toppled, contents eviscerated. There, crouched amid the refuse, was a gangly abomination, rummaging with deliberate malice. The air reeked of decay, cloying and familiar. I trained the light on its back. It twisted, eyes reflecting crimson malice, limbs frozen. The flashlight trembled. Tall, even in its hunch, skin scabbed and pallid, scars snaking across shoulders like ancient bindings. It was the same entity, the Riverton nightmare reborn. It lunged over the fence in a fluid nightmare, vanishing into the brush, leaving silence like a void. Reality warped. My chest constricted. Police were summoned, but the dispatcher's yawn dismissed my large animal as trivial, promising a cursory patrol that never materialized. The next day, I fortified our sanctuary, reinforced locks, bricks barricading fence spaces, wind chimes rigged as sentinels. Grandmother watched from the porch, her eyes shadowed with concern. "Is this about the thing from years ago?" she probed. I evaded, feigning nonchalance, but her gaze pierced like truth serum. Paranoia bloomed into obsession. Evenings became rituals, testing locks, flicking lights, scanning through curtains for lurking forms. Dread itched beneath my skin, an unrelenting torment. Nights blurred. I'd catch glimpses over the flickering street lamp, a hunched silhouette, patient as death. One interminable vigil at 2 a.m., I stationed myself on the porch, knife clutched, lights extinguished to merge with the dark. Heart thundered, eyes strained into the yard's abyss. Hours bled away, drowsiness clawed. Only 4 wind chimes to clang, a metallic wail slicing the night. Knife ready, I prowled, beam probing shadows, the air thick with damp grass and underlying rot. No visible intruder, yet the tension coiled tighter, whispering that it waited, biding time in the gloom. Dawn crept in, birds mocking with their songs, but exhaustion brought no solace. The calm felt fraudulent, a prelude to catastrophe. That scarred monstrosity, the one that tasted my blood in Riverton, had tracked me across years and miles. It lingered now, unhurried, savoring the hunt. And in the quiet moments, I swear I hear that tapping again, faint but insistent, drawing even closer, promising that next time it won't flee into the shadows. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true middle-of-nowhere stories. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the rest of the membership here on Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for your continued support. I've always said it, and I'll say it again. Without you, I wouldn't have a voice, and I would be sitting here talking to the void. Thank you so much for sticking with the channel and with me. If you are new here and you like what you have heard, please leave a like and comment. If you'd like to become part of the family, please hit that subscribe button and make sure to set your notification bell to all. That way you don't miss every video I upload. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please stay vigilant and please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.